Good evening, all. Tonight we are discussing John Locke and materialism. So, we're going to think about this in kind of Newtonian terms. If everything in the physical world is truly corpuscular, remembering that corpus is Latin for body, so meaning little atomic bodies, is it possible then that the mind also is ultimately atomic? Locke wants to address this by saying, is our mind really anything but kind of a collection of our experiences? Those things that we've done and those things that have been done to us. So John Locke shows up as one of the fathers of British empiricism that are going to come to include some of the really influential British philosophers of his time. We've also got George Berkeley, David Hume, and John Stuart Mill. So he's going to write an essay concerning human understanding. This is going to defend a naturalistic account and kind of a reductionist strategy, literally reducing everything down to what we might observe in nature. Locke is going to say that there are no innate ideas, that is, innatus, born into us. Instead, the mind only becomes furnished by way of experience. That is, we only know those things that we experience in some way. Not only knowledge, but also self knowledge comes from them. So our personal identity then becomes a collection of things that we get by way of experience. So the age of Newton really is the first time we start to see this Newtonian psychology that's going to be developed by Locke. Locke was a physician, but also was trained in the empirical sciences of his day. Locke attended Oxford, stayed there for 15 years, became a personal physician to Lord Ashley Cooper, the Earl of Shaftesbury, whose descendant is going to be a philosopher in his own right. During his time there, he discovers Descartes and says, really, this has gone so much further than the scholastic philosophy that he himself had learned at Oxford. He's trained as a physician, gets admitted to the Royal Society, which is really pretty impressive in his day. Now, what Locke is looking for is a purely scientific approach to understanding society. Over there on the right, what we have is kind of how Locke's philosophy breaks it out. Below that black line on the bottom, we have those things that are objective. We have objective knowledge of them. So the self, we know that we exist because of intuition, that is, we feel we exist. We know God by inference, and he uses the cosmological argument. So basically, looking out at the cosmos and how impressive it is, something really pretty complex had to have made that. We're going to call that something God. And bodies. These bodies are the cause of simple ideas. So things that we encounter, other people that we encounter, and so on. And they have primary qualities like solidity, extension, figure, mobility. And those are going to lead to secondary qualities. Now, on the subjective side of that, this is where we decide for ourselves what it's going to mean to us. So the subject knower is our mind. The objects that we know by intuition form simple ideas, which we can abstract from. We can form complex ideas by putting them together. And both our sensations and our reflection on those sensations combines to form our experience. So this is only possible, really, when we take this from a Newtonian science perspective. So he's kind of building here on what Francis Bacon had done in his Novum Organum. The scientific method, then, is a way of particularizing complex phenomena, reducing them down to some kind of ideal state, and then determining the principles that made them complex in the first place. So Newton is going to develop a simple model in which we've only got two real variables operating. We're going to address those through observation and experiment. Newton also begins with this assumption that the ultimate things that make up our reality, that are not in the visible, palpable form presented to our senses, are made up of those little bitty bodies, the corpuscles. So, what goes into our human understanding? The central question of Locke's essay is, how is the mind furnished? There are some things that we don't need to experience to know. So, for instance, the law of contradiction. Something cannot be and not be at the same time, except Schrodinger's cat, more on that momentarily. So, there are some things that we know immediately, indicating that they're kind of more of an intuitive thing than an understanding thing. So, here are some fun Schrodinger's cat memes for you. Schrodinger's cat is both alive and dead. If you are not familiar with this concept, go ahead and Google it. You will have all kinds of fun. Now, other things we know to be universally true. So all those yucky proofs you had to do in high school geometry class, symbolic logic, all that kind of stuff are things that are universally true. But that has to be proven through arguments. They're not intuitive, they're what Locke is going to call demonstrative knowledge. That is, I can demonstrate them to be true. But the most elementary stuff in our mind come from our varied sensations. All the facts of the external world come only through sensory channels. We see them, we taste them, we touch them, we hear them, we smell them. Okay? So, through our sensory perception, we come to know the world. In his essay, Locke gives a version of what's called the milieu problem. You've got a guy, he's been born blind, we're going to give him his sight via surgery somehow. And the question is, will he recognize visually what up until that point he had only known tactilely? And Locke answers, as you might expect. On gaining sight, no, he's not going to have any appreciation of what he's seeing because now he's seeing shapes and colors and so on. These elementary sensations that we form have to be combined and held together in some meaningful fashion. So the sensations that form our perceptions then become joined together in the same way that these little corpuscular or atomic elements of the physical world are held together. Locke says, for lack of a better explanation, that this is done through gravity. Now, he doesn't examine why this is the case, and he doesn't really want to speculate, but he's following in Newton that gravitational pull is going to have some significant influence on us. Speculations, then, are held together by an associative process. Events that we experience together frequently come to be associated together causally. So, for instance, when I enter a room I've never been in, I'm going to look around on the wall, I'm going to flick a switch because I assume that the lights are going to come on. Out of these elementary sensations, we form, by an associative process, what Locke calls simple ideas. The contents then of our consciousness, to be understood, have to be reduced down to their most elementary constituents, bare sensations. And these sensations are of two kinds, primary and secondary. The direct experiences we have of the physical quality of objects, these are its primary. So its shape, its hardness, its weight. They're inherent in the thing. That is, it doesn't matter who the percipient is, whether it's me or it's someone else. We can say that the apple on the right there is roughly spherical, it's red with a little bit of yellow, and there's only one of them there. Secondary experiences, these take the interaction between the primary quality of the object, but through a percipient, me seeing it. So on the right down there, we have the horse of a different color. But what color is the horse? Is it purple? Is it violet? Is it eggplant? Is it aubergine? Is it, any one of a number of things? So color, taste, smell, and sound of things. Different types of music that we might like, but other people might hate. If you like spicy food or you can't stand it. If you like the smell of skunk and gasoline and other strange things, but other people don't. These are secondary experiences that are really kind of dependent on us. If all that we know then from these experiences come to be associated with the mind, now we've got those old problems of knowledge. Kind of goes towards that materialistic theory of the mind. Locke's going to distinguish between two essences at a fundamental level. So we don't really know the real essence of things because we don't have a perceptual power that's equal to the task of discovering that. So we start to classify things according to the properties as we perceive them. These things are light, these things are heavy, those things are round, these things are oblong, and so on and so forth. The classification then, we give them names. So these designations are what we call the nominal essence, which is based on conventional, literally we come together to decide it, social and pragmatic considerations. So we agree that things that can go on your head, that protect you from the weather, and that maybe enhance your appearance, we're going to call those hats. Things that you can live in, whether they're made out of brick or straw or mud or canvas or whatever, we'll call those houses, and so on and so forth. Because without this, we really don't have an ability to communicate with one another what things are and ought to be. So all of this should leave room for a certain kind of skepticism about all of our claims to know. How do we really know what we know at this point if things are possibly and consistently in a state of flux? So there's a problem that's a thought problem called the ship of Theseus. So there we have a Greek trireme, just because I think they look cool. And imagine this same ship after each one of its planks is replaced over a course of years with a new one. That is to say, every single oar, every single stick of wood, every single yard of canvas would be replaced with new stuff. Is it still the same ship? They haven't been replaced all at once, but only gradually and over a long period of time. So that's kind of one of those weird thought questions that can arise from this. Locke is going to say that our personal identities are very much the gift of these experiences that we've had throughout our lives. Our memories, then, as present in our consciousness and held together gravitationally, is what makes us the way we are. Now, it's kind of easy to make fun of Locke because if you really take a reductionist approach to this, you could say someone who commits a crime is not the same person who's later tried for it and even later punished for it because they've changed through their experiences. Now, Locke wouldn't actually think that. What Locke does do, though, is he gives to us this idea that the authority of experience over our intuitions, our reasons, and so on really has a lot to offer us and something that we definitely might learn from. All right, let's shift gears now and talk about the challenge of materialism. So, with Locke's corpuscular psychology, it's really good. It gives us a lot to think about, but there are some significant critiques that can be leveled against it. One of these is going to be created by Leibniz, and he is going to give some limits of empiricism. Another by George Berkeley, who is going to critique materialism, and we're not worried about that stuff. So, in a couple of word pairings, we're going to look at different positions on philosophy of mind. So, these are going to kind of express the two poles of materialism and rationalism as we approach these. So, the first one is no matter, never mind. This is a materialistic position. Without material organization, there could be no mental life. In other words, if there were not things, we could not think about things. So you got to have the things there first. No mind, never matter. This is a rationalist position. This says the material world, to have any kind of existence at all, presupposes a thinking thing to experience it, or the realm of the idea in which the material world might inhere. Now, Locke's essay is asserting that mind is really nothing but a complex collection of current and stored experiences. So we've got the open mind there, we've got the really cool Death Star cookie jar, and then on the far right, we've got the Indiana Jones warehouse. So every time we do something or something is done by us, it's going to be filed away in our cookie jar, our warehouse, or what have you. To influential philosophers of his time, Locke seems to underestimate the activity complexity and creative power of the mind. So his view is sometimes what's called tabula rasa, means literally blank slate or empty tablet, that we're then going to fill in by having experiences. Gottfried Leibniz, who has some really impressive hair, is a noted statesman, invents the calculus alongside Isaac Newton, and a lot of his writings are really foundational for what we now study as probability and statistics. Leibniz is going to respond to Locke's essay concerning human understanding with new essays on human understanding, and he's going to really challenge some of the philosophy that's presented by Locke. Leibniz takes Locke to essentially be saying that nothing is in the mind at all except what was first in the senses. In other words, nothing gets into our mind without us seeing it, tasting it, touching it, hearing it, smelling it, and so forth. So Leibniz is kind of giving this rationalist answer to empiricists, saying nothing's in the intellect that's not first in the senses, or nisi intellectus ipse, because it sounds cooler in Latin, except the intellect itself. Unless we've already got an organizing, rational, self-reflecting power, that is the mind, any experiences we have would count as nothing to us. One of my favorite memes on the right there, intellect. I saw this wino. He was eating grapes. I was like, dude, you have to wait. Leibniz is going to distinguish between the kind of nullity that we might think of in mathematics, like a point that doesn't really take up any space, and something that has real existence, like a mind. Leibniz says knowledge is not just a collection of ideas. It's got to be something more than that. He's also going to argue that perception as we think of it is inexplicable on mechanical or material grounds. So to demonstrate this, he constructs what he calls an ideal model. Think about a machine that can think, feel, and have perception. Let's make it large enough so that we can enter it and look around. We're going to see moving parts, gears, and so on, but never anything to explain a perception. We won't see ideas, we won't see memories or colors, none of the things that we frequently say the mind contains. This is going to be true no matter how complex the machine is made. It's bigger on the inside. Now, George Berkeley is going to come along, also a thinker and a scientist, and says materialism is untenable. Literally, we can't hold on to it because the material world has no independent existence at all apart from ourselves. Berkeley is interested in optics, is specifically interested in depth perception as well as perspective in drawings, is the author of a treatise concerning the principles of knowledge, and he wants to know, what can we actually claim to know? Added to ideas is this perceiving active entity, which Berkeley calls mind, spirit, soul, or myself. So by which he doesn't denote any one of his ideas, but a thing distinct from them. This leads Berkeley to his famous position on the theory that there is an independently existing material world. Basically, these primary and secondary qualities and qualifiers are ideas, and nothing can be like them but another idea. Berkeley's also going to ask how it could even be possible for an independent material bodies to exist that didn't need a mind to perceive them. All that's knowable then are ideas, perceptions, sensations, images, and thoughts, and an idea can only be like another idea. So the idea of a chair is not wooden, angular, and subject to be sat upon. The idea of a chair is, well, whatever we think of. Maybe we think of a big overstuffed easy chair or a lazy boy or something like that. As in Leibniz's machine, there's no material chair discoverable inside our head. A chair, as something that ontologically exists, is present to our perception, but it's really an aggregate of its segregate attributes perceived together. We see the various boards, the seat, the legs, the back, and so on, sometimes the arms. When was that chair a chair? Was it a chair, for instance, when it was still the planks at the lumber mill or at the Home Depot or wherever? Well, no, because it hadn't been built yet. Was it the chair when it was still in the tree in the forest, or when it was an acorn that was going to be the tree that would be in the forest, that would be in the mill, that would be in the Home Depot, that would be made into the chair? It's kind of hard to say. The chair ultimately is what it becomes, but when it became that is sort of subject to our own interpretation. So everything kind of remains. We do have chairs and tables and stars and sunsets, but we have to change our definition of what these things are, or at least how we're going to think of them. They're ideas that subsist only in the mind of us as a percipient while we're actively perceiving them. They don't exist out of, but subsist. They under exist. Ourselves in the case of particular things, God in the case of the whole. So Berkeley is really pretty comfortable with this entirely empiricistic ontology and stretches it as far as it will go. In an argument that's kind of amusing, but it's also not transparently false. The material world has no existence independent of our or God's idea of it. In other words, for the world to exist, we have to be here to experience it. That is as far as we are going this evening. I hope this is giving you something to think about, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.